Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! This is the late 1980s, a much stupider time in many ways. My 8th grade year, I went to a public magnet school for theater. It was far from my home in a largely black neighborhood with a high crime rate. The school got funding because of their status, and most of the white kids, including me, who went to the school were in a program. I did use white female privilege for sure. I was pretty manipulative, but I also come from an abusive household, and I was focused on revenge as well as survival because I did think this girl might kill me. And yes, I did provoke her. Once because I was angry, and once deliberately to get her into more trouble and me out of it. I made friends with a Hispanic girl named Camelia, but eventually, she ended the friendship because another girl, Kiara, had said that Camelia needed to choose between me and her. Cam said she could hang out with me on the bus, but she was afraid of what Kiara might do if she hung out with me during school. I was hurt, but I didn't really know if Cam was using it as an excuse because I certainly wasn't one of the cool kids. Kiara knew I knew and taunted me some, but I didn't really react much. One day I sit down to my civil law class and I see that a paper has been left behind by Kiara from the previous class. In class, a civil law teacher would just have us copy the vocab words and definitions, which we would then turn in as homework later. Though Kiara had misspelled many of the words, she was more than halfway done. Would still get credit despite that. This teacher didn't care about spelling, just that you copied the list. And since I had her in PE next class, I thought I'd do something nice and give her the paper when I saw her. My policy at the time was to meet cruelty with kindness as much as I could. So I gave Kiara the folded paper, telling her that she'd lost it and I didn't want her to have to do it over again. I hadn't expected a thank you, just a head nod maybe. Instead, she accused me of stealing her homework to cheat, which, looking back on it, was probably a defense mechanism. But I snapped. Kindness deactivated. You copied this list and somehow misspelled most of the words. The day I need to steal homework from you is the day I suffer from intense brain damage, I said. Now Kiara outweighed me by quite a bit, and she had a nasty temper. At that point, she decided to give me that brain damage. I saw it coming. Everything slowed down. I could have run to minimize the damage, but I did not. My brain went into overdrive. I knew we were surrounded by PE teachers. They were overstaffed for outdoor activities because fights were a problem, and I knew that whatever happened, it wouldn't be for long. So she started punching me. Fine, I've taken a beating before at home, and I know that even if I land a punch, it's not going to do damage. And it's not going to make me look good. But the sun is glinting off her many gold chains. She was proud of those gold chains. My target. I put an arm to my face and the other outstretched towards my target. I just grab onto those chains looking like I'm just trying to keep her off of me. Never once hitting her. When she's taken down into a hold with extreme prejudice by this jacked female PE coach who weightlifted professionally, all her chains break. We both get taken to an office room in a gym while the teachers call discipline. It was not such a good idea to put us in a room alone together, but since the room was encased in glass, they put us in chairs away from each other and several teachers were inside talking on the other side of the glass. I guess they thought it was okay. Kiara threatening me and cursing at me, talking about how I never even got a hit on her when I deliberately provoked her, not even looking up at her, and saying, well, I never wanted to hit you. Figured replacing every one of those chains would hurt a hell of a lot more. By my estimation, I've broken nearly $1,000 worth of chains, and she hadn't really noticed until I said anything. From the outside of the room, they just saw this large girl jump up and start wailing on me again, exactly as I planned. And for the second time, they got to witness me not even fighting back. I did get my parents to mention that maybe it wasn't smart for them to leave me in a room with her after she beat me up. My plan had been to get her to attack me again, and it had worked. Even with as little time as she'd had, I got a bit of a cauliflower ear and some bruising on my face. Girl could fight, I'll give her that. Full on, prize fighter punches, no girl slaps here. My story to the teachers was that I was trying to give her homework back and she accused me of stealing it to cheat, and I told her I didn't need to because it was just copying vocab, and that she'd attacked me the second time because she'd noticed her chains were broken. With tears in my eyes, I told them I didn't mean to, I was just trying to keep her from hurting me. Nothing I'd done constituted fighting, and teachers had their eyes on her and me the whole time. She'd been in trouble for fighting before and I had no record of any kind. She was suspended, I was not. Likely because they were worried about the liability of the second fight, which was technically their fault. Now I knew that when she came back, she'd likely try to hurt me again, probably in meaner and sneakier ways. And I was trying to figure out ways of getting her out of the school for good. I figured the easiest way would be to provoke her in public again, though she might not fall for it again, and I was worried that if she got me alone, she was pretty capable of putting me in the hospital. At the very least, she definitely had friends. I also knew that the threat of the school getting one of their magnet kids pulled because of an unsafe environment would be bad for the school, their reputation, and ultimately their funding. I was busy gathering information on her and other fights she'd been in for my next move when she basically handed me a reason to get her kicked out for good. It gets back to her that I'm asking around. Pre-internet, it was hard to do research on people without them knowing about it. She's friends with some popular guys at the school, huge, tough middle schoolers, some older than they should be because they've been left back well on their way to thug life. These guys corner me at school in a busy hallway while she's out to tell me to leave Kiara alone or else they will be doing something about it. I notice the group's body language. Many of them are uncomfortable with threatening a girl, and I realize it's something I can use. At the time, I was a nerdy, white, bespectacled female, all of 80 pounds soaking wet. And I look up from my cower, straighten my spine and answer them, shifting eye contact from guy to guy. Beating up a tiny girl won't do a lot for your reputation. I know she's your friend, and you're loyal. I respect that. You can tell her you delivered on the threat just like she told you to. I'm going to forget all of your faces, but not the threat. Unless you actually hurt me, lift a hand to me, and I will suddenly have a very good memory. Anything happens to me, even if I can't talk, I will make sure you're the first they talk to. The threat I'm going to admin with, your faces and names, not so much. No matter what they say or how hard they lean on you, I didn't give you up. Then I went to the admin a day later, told them I got threatened, didn't know who because I was crying and couldn't pick them out. Said the keywords, I don't feel safe, and I know that all the boys who were part of her hangout group got called into the office. Those boys never talked to me or bothered me again, but neither did they get suspended. Kiara never came back and was sent to an alternative school. Cam and I were free to be friends for the rest of that school year. I didn't end up going to school in that area the next year because of this and because there was a murder in a parking lot that summer. In 2018, I worked for a very small business owned by a wealthy couple from a Western European country. They had 3 employees total, including myself, at the time I started. The job was easy and straightforward at first, but there were some red flags early on. The position started off with 2 weeks as a training period, during which I would work with another person. After those 2 weeks, I'd work shifts on my own on weekdays and with one other person on weekends. This meant that employees couldn't have normal lunches or breaks, which goes against our state's labor laws. I never signed a waiver for this, and it wasn't clear that I couldn't take my lunch breaks when I started. They had gluten-free options and heavily advertised this on social media. Any other establishment in our state would have adhered to strict sanitation requirements to avoid cross-contamination, but these people were shockingly relaxed. They never asked me for a copy of my food handler's license before training me to cook, and they instructed me to clean the entire shop with rags and plain water. No separate cooking surface or utensils for gluten-free menu items. A few weeks into my hiring, they purchased jugs of sanitizer and explained that they were expecting an inspector from the health department. They instructed me to not use the sanitizer because using it regularly was too expensive, but to keep it visible and lie to the health inspector about our sanitation practices. From there, things only got shadier. I received a flat $40 to $80 in tips with each paycheck. However, the rounded to the nearest $5 increments of tips seemed suspiciously low. When I worked the register, I saw hundreds of dollars in card tips and knew they could have only been split by myself and two other people. We should have been making that bi-weekly figure per person in one day, if it was busy. The owner got abnormally upset if my coworker and I split our tips at the end of each shift. The owner knew about things like that because he installed surveillance cameras shortly after I was hired. He watched it at all hours of the day, often monitoring the shop from his car in the nearby parking lot. Soon, I started getting reprimanded regularly for going against the early red flags. If he saw me eating lunch, he told me that he didn't care if I ate, but I better look ready to cook if a customer walked by. I'd have to stay at the register but not let anyone see me eat. I'd often go days without eating more than one meal because my hours were so long and I never got more than a minute to put anything in my face. If he saw me using the sanitizer, he'd insist that I was wasting his money. I told him that I felt concerned using the same cooking utensils for gluten-free dishes as I did for dishes that contained gluten. I felt that since so many of our customers had gluten-sensitive/allergies, it was only a matter of time until someone got sick. He told me that he had been operating this way for over a year and nobody ever got sick, so there is no point in worrying about it. I noticed my tips were about $10 less than usual that pay period. Additionally, the owner expected us to cook for customers if we were still physically present in the shop, no matter where we were in our closing procedures. We were never to turn anyone down, but we wouldn't be paid overtime if closing took longer as a result. We also weren't allowed to start any of the closing procedures early because he didn't want customers to think we were closed even if we were. Eventually, one of the other employees announced she was pregnant. As her pregnancy progressed, her ability to carry out a lot of her responsibilities diminished. It was medically necessary for her to cease heavy lifting, to be able to sit down, and to have access to her breaks and lunches to get her proper nutrition. The owner reprimanded her for these things and told her that he expected her to operate at her pre-pregnancy capacity. He added that she shouldn't let pregnancy make her lazy and that if she didn't remain active and she let herself eat all the time, her baby would come out fat, just like her. She tried to call out sick once too, and she had to rush to the hospital because she was experiencing abnormalities in her pregnancy and thought she might have been miscarrying. She and the baby turned out to be fine, but the owner yelled at her for missing her shift and told her that he didn't care if she miscarried. Her responsibility was to him first. She ended up quitting, but remained friends with them. I don't know why, to be honest. The owner's wife wrote passive-aggressive notes explaining that they were always watching us during our shifts and that they would start deducting our tips if we made any mistakes. If we made a mistake from cooking, resulting in us wasting ingredients, it will come from our tips. If we broke an item in the inventory, it will come out of our tips. If we took too long to finish closing duties, still no overtime, and it will come out of our tips. It became more and more obvious that the owners included themselves in the tip pool, which is also illegal in our state. I was the only employee at the time who didn't feel threatened by these people. My other co-worker was an illegal immigrant from the same country as the owners. They treated her like crap and she didn't feel like she could do or say anything about it because they repeatedly and falsely told her that she had no rights. They gaslighted her into thinking that they were so nice to hire her when no one else would. She felt like she had to work for them and she had to do whatever they told her to do because if she didn't, she'd lose her only source of income with no guarantee of another one. If anyone confronted the owners about any of their violations, they would act shocked and insist that they were so new to the country that they don't know any of the laws yet. Any of their general jerk acts was a culture difference. They relied on these two defenses so much that they never bothered to actually protect themselves from a legal standpoint. I already knew I wanted to quit and that I wanted to alert local authorities to all their violations, but the final straw for me was when they cut my pay for making mistakes while I was exhausted and processing personal trauma. They made me sign a contract agreeing to the cut, but applied it retroactively to the pay period before the contract was signed. While it sucked not getting that extra money, I laughed for 20 minutes straight when I put together my pay stub in my copy of the contract. They basically offered themselves up on a silver platter because of their own incompetence. I documented everything I could because everything was so hilariously illegal. I had compiled a thick portfolio of evidence in no time and filed a wage complaint at the same time I handed in my 2 weeks' notice. Once they knew about the wage complaint, they started a campaign of slander against me, which made me lose my next job. I didn't have hard evidence of that, so I let it go and applied somewhere else. The stolen tips really screwed up my taxes. My former bosses reported my actual tips to the IRS, but kept me in the dark about the figure and gave me so much less that I ended up owing the IRS $400 more than what I expected. I spent the time between my employment with them and the hearing with the labor commissioner at the Department of Labor working alone on my case. On the day of the hearing, my former bosses brought their immigration lawyer, and a stranger they paid off to act like they were my co-worker, who had no idea why I filed a complaint against them in the first place. All the evidence he presented against me had nothing to do with my claims of not getting paid overtime, not getting my meal breaks, and having my tips stolen. It was all just fake letters from fake people with awful Mary Sue OC type names. All the documents he presented could have been typed up the night before. It was so bad. Their defense relied heavily on slander too. Who would you trust, me, a straight A university student at a prestigious school, or her, an uneducated lowlife with an entry-level job? Every time I presented hard evidence to the labor commissioner, the lawyer scrambled to come up with an explanation for why I was lying, but failed miserably. When I showed the labor commissioner my contract informing me of the pay cut with a pay stub reflecting a retroactive cut, the lawyer still didn't understand what was happening. Their defense absolutely crumbled and the labor commissioner poked several holes in their stories. Fast forward to about a year later, I received a $2,300 check in the mail, which meant that I was awarded every penny due to me. What made this even sweeter for me was the date on the check. It was the same as the start of our city's stay-at-home order due to the pandemic. Not only are they losing money due to decreased business as a result of COVID-19, but they were legally required to pay me out at the same time. I won't be surprised if they don't survive the economic impact. But unlike the vast majority of small businesses in my area, they actually deserve it. Revenge is sweet. Living in this dorm-style building felt like a rite of passage in the city. It was affordable, centrally located, and always buzzing with the energy of young people and students. But the walls? Oh, those walls. They might as well have been made out of paper for all the privacy they offered. I remember the first night I realized just how thin they were. It was around midnight and I was nestled in bed, a book resting comfortably in my hands. Suddenly the blare of a TV erupted, startling me so much that my book thumped to the floor. The noise seemed to be coming from the apartment next door. I pressed an ear against the wall and the sounds of a late-night talk show host laughing boomed through as if he was right there in my room. The next day I decided to address the issue politely. I wrote a friendly note. Hi neighbor, hope you're well. Last night, your TV was quite loud and it was hard for me to sleep. Could you please lower the volume in the late hours? Thanks so much. Your neighbor. I slipped it under her door on my way to work, hopeful for a quieter evening. However, as the sun set and the city quieted down, the volume from next door did not. The walls vibrated with the bass of an action movie, shattering any hopes of a peaceful night. Frustrated, I knocked on her door the following day. When she opened, I was met with a glare from a woman in her 50s with a scowl on her face. Can I help you? She snapped before I could speak. Hi, I'm your neighbor. I was wondering if you might be able to keep the TV down at night. It's quite loud in my apartment. She looked at me and said, Look, I pay rent here same as you. I'll do as I please in my apartment. But the walls are very thin and it's quite disruptive. Well, maybe you need better earplugs. She yelled before slamming the door in my face. That night the volume went up even higher. It felt deliberate, like a noisy declaration of war. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling as car chases and gunshots echoed through my bedroom. It was impossible to think, let alone sleep. I found myself missing lines in my book, losing track of paragraphs as a noise invaded every thought. Over the next few weeks, I knocked gently on the shared wall whenever the TV blared too loudly. Sometimes I'd hear her scoff or yell, Mind your own business, through the thin barrier. Once she even banged back. It was wearing me down, the lack of sleep, the constant tension. I felt trapped in my own home. Days turned into weeks and the constant battle with the TV volume became a miserable routine. Despite my initial hope that she might soften over time, Karen only seemed to become more obstinate. It was as if the louder her TV blared, the more she proved her point. This was her territory. One chilly evening after another day of work and dreading the return to my noisy apartment, I decided to try talking to Karen again, perhaps face to face. We might reach some understanding. I waited by the stairwell, timing it so I could casually run into her. She climbed the stairs, grocery bags hanging from each arm. I stepped forward. Hey Karen. She barely looked at me and said, What? I was thinking maybe we could work out a schedule or something for the TV, just so it's a bit quieter at night. She stopped abruptly, turning to face me with a frown. Listen, I don't know what your problem is. I am living my life. If you can't handle a bit of noise, maybe this isn't the place for you. It's not a bit of noise, it's very loud, and it's affecting my sleep. Karen rolled her eyes, shifting the bags in her hands. Well, I am not changing anything. Deal with it. With that, she turned and continued up the stairs, leaving me standing there, more frustrated than before. That night, as the TV began its usual evening ritual, louder than ever, something inside me snapped. I marched over to the shared wall and knocked hard. 3 sharp raps. The TV volume dipped momentarily before roaring back to life even louder. From the other side, I heard Karen's voice, shrill and angry. Stop banging on a wall, you lunatic. I knocked again, desperation edging into my actions. This was my home too, and I deserved peace. You want to play that game? Karen's voice came through the wall, thick with challenge. Suddenly, the sound of something heavy hitting the wall from her side made me jump back. The following day, feeling hollow from the lack of sleep, I made a decision. If talking wouldn't work, maybe it was time to involve someone else. Someone who had the authority to intervene. I looked up the non-emergency number for the local police station. Then I dialed the number. Police department, how can I help you? Hi, I'd like to file a noise complaint against my neighbor. A noise complaint? Have you tried talking to your neighbor about this? Yes, multiple times. It's very disruptive and she's not cooperative. I'm not sure what else to do. The officer sighed. Alright, I'll log the complaint. But honestly, these things are better resolved between neighbors. As the night approached that day, and the familiar sound of a TV turning on seeped through the walls, I praised myself. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. It was a typical Friday night and I had invited a couple of my friends over for a gaming session, hoping to distract myself from the ongoing feud with Karen. As we set up the gaming console and piled snacks on the coffee table, the atmosphere was light and jovial. Finally, some fun around here, my friend Mike said, tossing a controller my way. Yeah, it's been tough with all the noise next door, I replied. Just as we settled into the game, the familiar roar of Karen's TV pierced through the walls, louder than ever, as if timed to ruin our evening. The sound effects from the action movie she was watching clashed with the game's audio, making it hard to concentrate. Emma asked, Is that from next door? Yeah, that's Karen. She loves her TV loud. Man, that's insane. How do you even sleep? Well, not very well. Frustrated, I stood up and knocked on a wall, hoping she'd give the hint. Instead, the volume increased. I knocked again, harder this time. The response was immediate. A loud banging from her side. Emma said, What the heck? Is she for real? The door suddenly slammed on Karen's side. We heard heavy footsteps thundering towards my door. The aggressive knocking that followed made us all jump. "Who is that?" Mike asked. Peeking through the peephole, my stomach dropped. A large, burly man stood angrily outside. "Open up. I need to have a little talk with you, punk." Confused, I shouted back, "Who are you? Why are you banging on my door like this?" He glared through the peephole. "I'm her son, you jerk. You keep knocking on the wall, disturbing my mom. You're gonna learn today." Realizing the situation was spiraling, I turned to my friends. "I am not opening that door." Mike nodded. "Good call. Does he look like he's leaving?" "No, he's just standing there, looking furious." "We should call the cops," Emma suggested. As I reached for my phone, the knocking grew louder, more insistent. "I'm warning you, open up," he yelled again. I dialed 911 quickly, explaining the situation in hurried, breathless sentences. "There is someone trying to break into my apartment. He's threatening us. Officers are on their way," the dispatcher assured me. Finally, we heard a sound of police sirens outside, and the knocking ceased. Peering out, I saw the man retreating back to Karen's apartment. When the police arrived, they took our statements and I explained the ongoing issues with Karen. "Her son just tried to break down my door," I said. "We will handle it from here," one of the officers said. "Guess that's one way to end the game night," Mike said, trying to lighten the mood. "Yeah, the most dramatic game night ever," Emma added. As my friends backed up to leave, the reality of what could have happened if that door had given way settled over me. This was no longer just about noise, it was about safety. The evening following the confrontation with Karen's son was eerily quiet. Perhaps it was the presence of the police that prompted some semblance of peace, or maybe Karen and her son were plotting their next move. Either way, the silence was both a relief and a source of anxiety. I knew it couldn't last. The next few days passed without incident, and I began to hope that maybe, just maybe, the worst was over. That hope was shattered one evening as I was making dinner. The sound wasn't the usual blast of the TV, but something far more menacing. A series of heavy, muffled thuds against the sheared wall. I froze, a chill running down my spine. "What now?" I muttered to myself, setting down the kitchen knife and moving cautiously toward the living room. The thuds grew louder, more aggressive, and then the unthinkable happened. A hatchet blade burst through the wall, splintering the plaster and leaving a gaping hole. I recoiled in horror at the sight of this. "This can't be happening!" I yelled, backing away as a blade pulled back and then smashed through another part of the wall. Panicked, I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. "He's back! He's breaking through the wall with a hatchet!" I shouted into the phone. The dispatcher seemed to be calm and said, "Officers are on their way. Stay on the line with me." As I waited, praying for the police to arrive quickly, Karen's son managed to create a hole large enough to climb through. He emerged, hatchet in hand. Just then, my friend Mike, who had been hanging around at my place again along with some of my other friends, jumped into action. He grabbed a heavy glass vase from the coffee table and threw it. It hit Karen's son squarely on the head, momentarily stunning him. "Get back!" Mike shouted, pulling me behind him. Karen's son shook off the impact. Another friend who had come back to check on me rushed out from the kitchen wielding a kitchen knife. "You need to leave now," he screamed. Ignoring the warning, Karen's son stormed at us, just as the police sirens wailed outside. My friend reacted swiftly, stabbing him in the leg. He screamed in pain and fell to his knees, dropping the hatchet. The next few minutes were a blur of blue uniforms and shouting. The police burst through the door, quickly assessing the situation. They handcuffed Karen's son, who was now shouting incoherently. Karen appeared at the threshold of the hole in the wall, screaming, "You've hurt my boy!" trying to push past an officer to reach her son. It was self-defense. Mike explained to the police. He came at us with a hatchet. The officers nodded, taking statements from all of us as they waited for an ambulance to arrive for Karen's son. The aftermath was a mess of paperwork, questions, and a lingering fear that hung over me like a dark cloud. Eventually, we were all taken to the station to give more formal statements. However, the police were clear that our actions were justified given the circumstances. Karen was evicted by the landlord after the incident, furious about the damage and the danger posed to other tenants. Her son was taken into custody, his prior convictions adding weight to the charges against him. As I finally returned home, the broken wall seemed to symbolize a hard-won peace. I knew that things would never be quite the same, but I hoped. This marked the end of a very dark chapter in my life. So I moved into a 4-bedroom uni house. I knew 2 of my housemates, let's call them Abby and Ben. Due to unfortunate circumstances, our previously planned housemate couldn't live with us, so we found a new one, Chloe. Chloe is a horrible housemate. This becomes apparent when she never pays any bills or rent on time, smokes like a chimney inside against our agreement, leaves home for a few days leaving a big pile of washing up for us to do, including our pots and pans, and screams while gaming on her laptop all the way till 5 a.m. The walls are sin. Just to name a few things, basically, she sucks. So about 4 months in, we can't stand her. We have a house meeting, basically, we sat there and tried to explain how we would prefer she didn't scream at her laptop, I assume gaming, until 5 a.m. every night as all of us get up early. Everything we brought up, she denied. We have each lent her a month's rent and bills too, and she hasn't paid any of us back. Over $1,000 between us. She denied it, saying she doesn't owe us. At this point, we are all pretty pissed. Then a few weeks later, it was a Saturday night, and being students, Abby, Ben, and I invited friends around for pre-drinks. We asked Chloe first, she said she would be okay, so that was fine. Turns out she finished work early, came home, and was shocked to find people there. I went up to her room. She kept coming down and turning the music down. It wasn't even loud in the first place. She got so angry she threw my speaker out the window. I didn't see her do it, but loads of people told me so. I've had enough. I went to get my speaker and she came with me. To my surprise, and as she left in full view of me, she keyed my car parked on a driveway. I got up with my speaker and shouted at her as she walked off. Luckily, we had an automatic light on the side of the house, and the car was driving down my road at the time, and the driver said he had a dash cam and probably caught it on camera. I stopped shouting in disbelief and gave him my email address. I went about my night enjoying the party. When it was time to leave, a lot of us hadn't finished our alcohol, so left it on a kitchen table and left. When we got back the next day and had sobered up in the morning, we found all the alcohol had been taken, along with a speaker, some headphones, and my laptop. Now I was really pissed. The revenge. I logged into my housemate's laptop on my email. This guy had pulled through, sent me a small clip of her keying the car, along with several close-up stills showing the key in contact. I first confronted Chloe asking if she knew where my stuff was, while Abby and Ben secretly recorded on their phones. Things got heated and she looked like she was going to fight me. I'm a big guy, 6'4", and I'm really not scared. I'm basically just pissing her off out of pure frustration. Chloe then swung her fists at me a few times, making contact. I didn't fight back. I put my hands and arms over my head and face. She then stomps off thinking she had won. Let me remind you, Abby and Ben were recording. I call the police, they show up, and I basically say I have a good reason to believe Chloe stole my alcohol and other possessions. They go up and knock on her door, and she tells him to go away. They can't go in without a search warrant. I filed a report about the assault and the items stolen. The police were very nice and basically told me how to fill it in. They come back the next day with a warrant for her arrest for assault and battery. They then search her room and find all the stolen alcohol bottles, my headphones, which clearly were mine as they only paired with my phone and my laptop and damaged speaker. I sued her and won. I had indisputable evidence along with witnesses for all the events. I got around $3,000 for the car, speaker, and rent she owed us, and an additional $5,000. She went to prison for resisting arrest, assaulting a police officer, assault, destruction of property, theft, and battery. She still had to pay rent for her room, which we used as a gym.